Today's podcast is brought to you by Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance. Accidents happen. Without the right coverage from the right insurance company, damage to your automobile can be a real financial hit. That's why Kentuckians appreciate the competitive rates and personal service they get from Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance. When the unexpected happens, count on us to help you get back on the road. To request a free quote, find your local KFB insurance agent at mykfbagent.com. Kentucky Farm Bureau, big on commitment. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going. We're here, and it's starting to be fall. It's starting to get nice out, and we were trying to figure out. We always like to have a fun conversation, so we have a neat one we're going to talk about. Is it neat? It's not really neat. It's something that I think everyone has. All right, everyone has something they're really into that, frankly, no one else is into.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you really want to talk about it, but like no one's really. For some reason, you're into this thing, right? And but you talk about it, and people humor you, and they're like, "Oh, that's nice," But you really like, you also understand no one cares. Do you have one of those things where like you really you watch something too much, or you're way too into something, and you understand that no one cares, but you.
Yeah, so first off, this took me a second because it was like, is there ever anything you talk about that, like, I don't know, people around you just kind of nod along and ignore you? And I said, yeah, like 95% of what I tell my husband.
It's me.
Like as soon as I get home and I'm like, how was your day? And he was like, it was good. How was yours? And insert me beginning to talk, ears turn off half the time because he's like, okay, same thing, different day.
We are both talkers. That's why we're doing this.
And our spouses are both humorers. Like,
right. And
that's
the
nice.
poor people around both of us that just smile and nod.
Yeah.
It's so nice. Everybody I work with, they just smile and nod. And I really appreciate it. It's really nice. They know
cool.
I'm a nice
Cool,
guy.
Matt.
I mean well, but they're like, yeah, man, that's great. Yeah, I'm really into that.
All right, here's my thing. What I finally figured out. So, so random. So Facebook has Reels, okay?
Yeah.
And 95% of the time, like whatever trend is on there, I'm like 2 weeks behind whatever's on TikTok. I never downloaded TikTok, whatever. I'm lame, that's fine. I don't need another app. But there's this thing called Hoof GP, no free ads, but he got one, I guess. And he is a Scottish guy that trims hooves on dairy cattle. And that sounds really like specific. Oh, Renee, you're watching ag videos. No. It's literally like a hoof. It's like what people that like watch Dr. Pimple Popper, that is what I'm doing with this hoof guy.
It's
like,
satisfying.
It's just
It's
the
like
foot. And I'm like, God, that's an overgrown. Like, what are we going to do? And then he gets to trimming, and I'm like, this is satisfying. Like, look how much better that cow walked after. And I watch these constantly, and like Peyton will walk by and be like, why are you watching those? And I'm like, look, like he got rid of the infection and we put a little pad. Like I can almost tell you verbatim what he's doing and what he's putting on the hoof. Like I could heal this. Don't give me a blade, but I could tell someone like, hey buddy, you need to hit more on that, right on that outer line. Like it's weird and nobody cares. I'm not around dairy cattle. I don't know why I care.
It's one of those satisfying things.
I got to watch them though.
I've seen these. Yeah, once it's cleaned up and nice, you're kind of like, yeah, it's good, man. That cow's better. The cow's feeling better now.
And look how much I learned.
And I learned how to do it.
Not going to, but I learned it. All right, what's yours? What we got?
I got a lot, man.
There's so many annoying things I like.
I've been on and off CrossFit for years to try to not be overweight. Just trying my best. That kind of was annoying to other people. I did play, we talked about this on a podcast once. I played rugby back in the day, and I would love to have someone to talk to about it. I guess now I might be able to actually talk to you about it. You seemed interested, but probably that.
I'd like to make it clear I'm not interested in CrossFit.
You're not in. Okay, yeah. No one is. I don't know why we think
do you know what I find annoying about CrossFit is that people that do CrossFit have to tell me they do CrossFit. Like I walk. Whatever. I do my little walk at my house. I've been trying to
You need to
I've told no one, because no one cares. But if I went to CrossFit, I think that you sign something at the door that says, I'm going to tell 5 people tomorrow that I did CrossFit tonight. That's what bugs me about CrossFitters.
But it's hard. So you're like, I don't need to tell someone how hard the thing I did was today. And tomorrow and the next day. and then
I'm going to share the video that my local CrossFit posted of me.
Yeah,
because I did that.
There's me. I did it.
Look how nasty and sweaty I am.
I think, a little bit of that. But I don't know. I think a thing that I watch when I have nothing to do, and I don't think I've told anybody this before, okay? It's safe. Don't worry. It's safe. Everybody got scared. It's totally safe.
Hand over eyes from the other room.
I love watching compilations of, like, The Voice and American Idol. hear me out. Where like the person is good.
Okay, so you want the good ones, though.
Only good ones. Like where they're like they come out and they shock it. Everybody's like, wow.
Is this one of those dad moments where you're like, I'm so sorry. I thought this video was 30 seconds and I've been sitting here 12 minutes watching season 1 highlights. Is that you?
Well, no, they are like that. They're like real long and they just show up and you're just it's neat to see someone have a moment. I guess I don't know why I watch these.
You want to see people succeed. That's beautiful.
I don't really talk about them until today, and there's probably a reason why, because it's a really dorky thing I watch. But yeah, like I'm sitting at a practice and the kids like doing the practice, and I'm just in my car. I'll watch like 15 of those in a row.
Wow.
It's really pretty weird.
That is something nobody cares about.
Nobody cares about, because they've probably seen it, but to watch just those moments over and over again is really strange. But yeah, CrossFit, probably I try to not talk about it because I know no one cares. Rugby's different because no one's watching it, so it's really hard to have any kind of conversation about what's going on in the world of rugby right now. But yeah, currently right now, South Africa is the #1 rugby country in the world.
Oh, here's another one that happens specifically in groups of females. I know it's funny in this podcast because we talk about sports all the time. I like to, as I get an ESPN update, read it out loud if I found it interesting. Like yesterday, the Reds beat, this is timestamping us a little bit. Yesterday, the Reds beat the Pirates, which also, why was that hard? But anyway, they beat the Pirates, and so they're alive.
They're alive.
They're
still alive.
And that's literally, I read verbatim, I was like, information nobody cares about. Reds beat the Pirates. Apparently that was tough, and they're still alive. And I had 3 different women in the cubes look at me and go, like, nobody cares.
I have no idea.
Like,
what sport are you talking about?
Like Pirates from where, Like had that full. So in female groups, I am the one that's like, oh my gosh, Thursday night football's at 8:15 tonight, and they're like, nobody cares. We're going to dinner, Renee. Like,
we have no idea.
Put your makeup on. Let's go. Like, quit being a dude. So that actually, if I'm gonna pick the #1 thing I talk about that no one around me cares about, if I'm around a group of females, it is sports.
Yeah.
And they don't care.
Yeah, I can talk sports all the time, but usually you run into especially college football, you'll find some people. But yeah, I think everybody has their thing. They have their like kind of random.
Like for Austin, it's F1. None of us care.
Austin, our tech guy, he talks about F1 a lot. I have no idea what's going on.
He told us something really cool right before we started. I already forgot the name of it. I don't even know.
I go, that's amazing. And I hope it goes well. That's all. That's pretty much all we said. So
yeah, one day if we keep making fun of Austin enough, he'll have to show his voice. Show his face. Show his voice on the podcast.
Yeah.
Till then.
I don't think he's looking at us right now going, that's never going to happen. He's a very introverted guy, but very smart. He makes it all happen for us. So, but yeah, if you like anything you're listening to or see on social media, it's a lot of Austin. So we appreciate that. So that's why I act like I'm interested in F1. Hey,
speaking of Austin, he lives in LaRue County. And so does our guest.
Yeah, we've had a couple LaRue County folks. This guy, I've known him for pretty much the whole time I've been a part of Farm Bureau. He does a lot of different things. Got a lot of hats in different things. He does all kinds of stuff. A great guest today. Lots of insightful conversation. I think folks are going to love it. All things that we were interested in. He talked about only things we were interested in.
Yeah, see, we started off the beginning of this to show you guys how uninteresting some of the things we talk about at home are. But the podcast is all about the good stuff.
Today's a lot of good, interesting conversation. And a guy really does get it and has a heart for it. So I think folks are going to really like today.
All right, we're going to get you to Ryan Bivens. Without further ado, I'm Renee Carrico.
And I'm Matt Hilton.
Let's get rural. All right, well, we got you here in person, Ryan. I don't know if I'm more impressed that we got you here or that you've only had one phone call since you made it in the room. This is a pretty impressive morning so far.
It is usually. I tell everybody I try to start my day off good every day. It doesn't mean it doesn't go to crap really quickly, but yes, the phone does ring, and it doesn't matter if it's a legislative call, if it's a farm call, whatever it is, or it's just a friend checking in. That's part of society and part of life, and I think it's not just me; it's everybody anymore. The phone always rings. So.
Yeah. One thing that speaking to that is one of the busiest families I think that I've ever dealt with when it comes to Farm Bureau is your family. You guys are in everything. Talk for even your kids. I mean, you guys are really involved in layers of different types of agriculture. Rewind a little bit. How did you get into agriculture? Is this a family thing? To the listeners that don't know you, how did you get into it, and why did you keep continuing on and just be so invested like you are?
You know, I tell people all the time, I think agriculture or farming is something that you have to have it in your system. Mm-hmm. You have to develop that love for it. And I think at an early age, I developed that love. You know, I don't consider myself different, or, you know, maybe I am a little odd according to some people, but, you know, I grew up in a family who both parents worked public jobs. But in the 80s, a lot of families, they raised small acreages of barley tobacco. Mm-hmm. That's how they made ends meet. That put Christmas under the table. It paid property taxes. And I had a love, you know, working. I tell people, when I got elected to the legislature, that is the first public job I ever had in my life. And here I was, 46 years old, my first public job.
To think about.
You know, because growing up in a small rural community, there was always tobacco to work in. There was hate. You know, a lot of people square-billed hay. You know, and everybody figured out real quick, Ryan's willing to work. So it's like I had to keep a schedule at an early age. Okay, I'm helping this person this day and this person next day. And I finally, in my high school years, I landed a full-time job on a pretty, at the time, it was a large-scale farm. You know, they were raising several thousand acres of grain, had 120-some acres to tobacco my senior year, and that was still under the quota system. You know, so I had that love. I wasn't scared of work. I was taught from an early age, you know, just like all of us are. We were taught to work hard in life. You know, if you got a job, you do it. You know, and we didn't have the distractions that we have today in life that my kids experience and whatnot. So I decided early on, you know, this is my career path. This is what I want to do. I wanted to be involved. Of course, was involved in 4-H, got heavily involved with FFA. And I remember the year I graduated high school, knew Dwight Greenwell well because I grew up in Spencer County. And a good friend of mine there was going to the summer outing that year, Young Farmer Summer Outing. And I was not serving on Spencer County Board or anything like that. I you know, that's where I had my insurance. So I obviously was a member under riding mom and dad's coattails. And he invited me to go to that summer outing. And there was something there. You know, there was others there that I knew, but you were with a group of people that were like-minded, that shared the same love you did. And I kind of figured out, you know what, these are my people. And I think that's what sparked that initial interest. And you know, when I got into college, of course, we grew up right on the Shelby-Spencer County line. I remember Doug Langley was the president of Shelby County Farm Bureau, and he called and he said, hey, I've got to have a young farmer chair on my board. So I actually served then on the Shelby County board. Well, then when I graduated college, we moved to LaRue County, and shortly thereafter, Misty became involved. Misty had been involved, you know, she had done outstanding youth. She had been to Eiffel, things that I hadn't done early on in life. And, you know, so we both knew the value of that. And I think that's kind of what sparked our interest, and we got involved. And we started going to young farmer outings, eventually served on committee. I served as chair there in 2008. Golly, that's a long time ago. Anyway, you know, that kind of developed that love. And I remember part of our driving motivation is I had this goal right after I got in college and kind of got involved that I said, you know what? I'm going to set the goal. We're going to win the Young Farm Family Award. And it quickly became not just Young Farm Family Award. We was going to win the Achievement Award on the national level. And that was a lot of the driving motivation, you know. But I think at the same time, we're taught or at least I was taught as a young man, you get involved. You've got to serve. You got to give back. And you got to stand up. You know, and I teach my boys all the time. For the two things I tell them, you got to stand up for yourself, and you got to stand up for others that can't stand up for themselves. Right. But the other thing is you got to tell your story. And I think it's what we've done wrong in agriculture. And I think, you know, that's kind of led to, whether you want to call it success or not, but that's led to my career path. And that's led to put me where I am at today.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember going to your place. I've done a billion Young Farm Family shoots. We're actually in the middle of right now. But yeah, I remember going to your place, and every time that we've done it, you know, it's about that couple, really. And that's how the national the chance at winning a national award is really when that couple is really, really, really strong. And knew that right away. I think you're both very bold and in a positive way. And I was like, these folks, they might win the whole darn thing here. So it was really neat to see that and be a part of that, and see your kids grow up and be as bold and well spoken as well. And I think that advocacy that you guys you and your wife both kind of naturally have, I think it's really been a benefit for Farm Bureau and for obviously your communities and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so talk about, you started building this farm, you started doing those kind of things, and, why do more? You guys both do more than just those farms. Why is it important for you guys to get out of there and be outspoken and be an advocate?
Well, I tell everybody every day, your goals change as you get older in life. Obviously when I was young, I had that goal of winning that Farm Family Award. Then it became, okay, if we could maybe grow the farm to this size, maybe if we could add grain storage, if we could do this. I tell everybody every day now, my goals center around one main objective, and that's being a first generation. It's the second generation. It's about taking care of them, trying to set them up for success. I want to leave things better than I found it, teaching them to have the love. And it's not just the love of agriculture, but it's the love of our farm groups, whether it's Farm Bureau, it's commodity groups, whatever it is, teach them that they have to stand up and they have to speak for themselves. They have to speak for those other people. It's very common. My wife says this best, and I've said for years, you've got to tell your story, because if you don't, there's others behind you that will tell it for you, and it's not the version you want. But she always says, anytime you tell a story or you talk about yourself, you're the hero in that story.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody else tells it, more than likely you're not the hero. You're going to be the villain. And I think that, that's putting it in simple layman's terms for things that we're taught and things that we're engaged in. You go through leadership groups, you go through those kind of things. And I think that's even led to my decision when I decided to run for, jump into the political arena. It's not just about my children, me anymore, or our generation. It's about my children, other people's children, grandchildren, future generations. We've got to kind of help take care of them, because if we don't, statistics don't lie. We look and we see the average age of the person involved in production agriculture has continued to increase. We've seen the number of people in production agriculture continue to decrease. We've seen farm size get larger. Are we going to, maybe we don't see it, maybe the three of us don't see it, but do our grandchildren see it one day? It's like, wow, that's an actual farmer. That's an oddity.
Right.
We don't think of that living in rural Kentucky, but I think that day could possibly come.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump back to the contest, because I get this pushback a lot for some reason, and it's not a ton, but it's people that say, "Oh, well, your young farm family, are you just trying to keep that FFA vibe alive, or make people, it's a contest? Why are you wanting people to want to, an achievement, get on a stage?" And what I tell people is that contest, one, is a lot of times that young farm family's first opportunity to set a goal after they're outside of competitive kind of organizations. This is their first opportunity to kind of do that, when the world of farming as young farmers is kind of tough. The goal is to just make it. Sometimes it's fun to have a little more of an exciting goal of like, oh, I could win something, I could be on stage. But the other thing I tell people, and I think you and a lot of our other past winners would say that, it gives you that first real look of perspective. If you go to AFBF, and it's not going to AFBF, I don't think people going to Anaheim in January are going to be like, wow, being in Anaheim's really giving me perspective. It's that room of people. The fact that you're in the same room competing with a lettuce producer in Arizona and his wife, or you're competing with a commercial dairy in Wisconsin. It's things you've never seen, you've never talked about. And I think there's just been a lot of really cool conversations for some of ours that don't even make it into the finalist round. They come back after that dinner and they were like, nothing else could happen on this trip. And the 3 hours I just spent at that networking event was worth every ounce of paperwork I did to get here. So kind of speak to, what did that feel like at that age? And then how is that the same or different as you've been on national boards with commodity organizations or traveled for Commodity Classic? I mean, is it that same feeling in every room, or is that first time that just gave you the bug?
It is. We feel comfortable when we're around people that have those same likes we do. But I think you realize that you develop friendships. And I go back to 2004. I did a program with soybean. At the time, it was sponsored by DuPont. Now it's sponsored by Corteva. It's called the Young Leader Program. And it's really funny how small of a world we live in agriculture. And I can tell stories about this all day. But I remember in that program, we get to that program, and that was a leadership program developed for both the husband and the wife. So that was a real cool aspect of it, because most of your leadership programs are just for an individual. This was an actual couples-based leadership program. Well, the couple that was from Indiana and also the couple from Tennessee, we got to know them, obviously neighboring states, and they're like-minded. They are doing a lot of the same things we are. And this is 21 years ago. Well, I remember in 2013 when we won that award, the couple from Indiana, they drove down that year and came to AFBF convention to be there with us. And there's not a week goes by that me and him don't speak.
Cool.
We've become really good friends. The couple from Tennessee, of course, back in the day when I was involved with young farmers, it sounds like a long time ago, and it's getting to be there. I guess it's over 10 years ago, but Tennessee was always highly competitive on the national level.
Yeah,
I mean, they won stuff every year. Well, it was funny because the year that the couple that was in that program, Ben and Jennifer, they were from Tennessee, and consider them, they're great people, good friends. And I'll never forget, Ben kept texting me all summer, "Are you applying for this award?" Because we're the same age. And he was sizing up competition. And I wouldn't respond to him. and it was really funny. We wound up at AFBF convention that year, and they won the achievement award that year at AFBF convention. And he's like, "Thank God." He said, I've told Jennifer all year long, says that darn Ryan and Misty, they're going to be up for it. They're our main competition. And we had a good laugh about that. And then, of course, the next year we come in, he walked up with the young farmer director at that time and introduced him to us. He's like, "Yeah," said, "our guys don't stand a chance this time. I know this couple. They're going to do well." But, it's about those relationships. And it's even when I served on the United Soybean Board. You build those relationships. And I tell people, it was really funny. The first day I go into legislature, and they're talking to the freshman class coming in. And they're telling us, saying, "All right, you need to get involved with the national associations with legislators and stuff." Because, and I remember Robert Stivers told us, he says, "I'll give you the example." He says, "I broke down one year, or had a friend break down in another state." And he's like, called me and said, "What do I do?" And he's like, "It's no problem. I know this person that's not too far from there. I can call them. They can help you out." And they're like, they're trying to drive home this importance of building your network, of having people. Said you're going to wind up having friends in every county in the state of Kentucky. You're going to have people across the nation that you know.
Right.
And I'm sitting there thinking about this, and I'm like, I've already got that. Agriculture has given me that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the funnest things when I went in the legislature. All these people, everybody holds their district really tight. And they start getting text messages from different individuals. They're like, "Hey, I know that Ryan Bivens. I've known him for a while." I'll never forget this one legislator in particular, and I won't say their name, but they were kind of, it was like you had to earn a rite of passage as a freshman.
Yeah.
And that day, the first day we're kind of all together, I introduced myself to all of them, and this person was kind of, I won't say mean, but just like, "Yeah, I don't have time for you, whatever."
Newbie, yeah.
Yeah, newbie. Well, the next time we're together, this person is making a beeline to me, and I could tell they're coming straight for me. And they come up and they're like, "Oh my God, how do you know such and such? I just got a text from such and such, and they've been a big supporter of mine. They say you're good friends." Well, I've known them for 20 some years because of Farm Bureau.
Yeah.
It goes back to those connections you've built, and that's how we accomplish things in life. And I often laugh. My wife and youngest son just finished running a 5K in all 120 counties in the state of Kentucky. Most people cannot say they've been to all 120 counties.
Most people can't say they've ran a 5K.
They can't say, I'm right there with you. I tell people, if you see me running, you better run too, because something's chasing me.
Yeah.
But to think about that aspect, and they told me I have not been in all 120 counties. But odds are I could probably sit down. It may take me a few minutes, but I can identify somebody I know in all 120 counties. And it's because of that small family-like setting that agriculture is, whether it be involved with commodity associations, Farm Bureau, whatever it is. We all have those connections. And I think that is what's so important. It goes back to what you were talking about, that setting, regardless, when you're in a group with people that are like you, that have the same similar thoughts, was brought up the same way, they have the same good moral raising, you're going to develop friendships.
Right.
I'm so glad you brought up the 5K, because I saw it on Facebook this week and I was like, I got to ask about this. I know I'm going totally off topic, but what made them want to do that? The 120 counties, did they just start hitting a lot of them and all of a sudden they're like, we're getting close to halfway? I mean, what did that?
I think they started running some of these races. And it was a cool thing for Misty to do with, obviously, as a mother, it's hard to relate to sons. We've got two boys, and it's harder, and she knows that, they both have a love for the farm. They want to come back to the farm. So obviously Dad's going to share things with them that Mom's probably not going to. And this was something cool they wanted to start. But I think they had run a few races. And then in June of 19, Avery had that bad gator accident on the farm. Mm-hmm. Took a helicopter flight, and he, we were told he would have physical limitations. I think we figured out real quick, it goes back to that network of friends you build. We figured out and everybody that's in ag knows this, that you have to have strong faith. Mm-hmm. And we figured out what the power of prayer was. And, I'm happy to report today, and obviously him running a 5K in every county, he has no physical limitations. He is a normal young man. He's got a scar to show for it and tell the story later on. But I think it become a challenge. And they got to seeing some of the similar people, and it goes back to just like in our ag groups, and you have those people that are like-minded around you that were running all these different races. And finally somebody brought it up to him, says, well, you all, you need to try to set a goal to run a race in every county. There's a few of us that have done this. There's a guy from Greene County that, we've gotten to know well, and he gets to know, and there's a group of them. They call themselves road runners. So that have run, and Avery and Misty were number 14 and number 15 to accomplish this feat, to run over 5K in every county.
Wow.
And Avery is actually the youngest one to ever accomplish that feat. So I think it's a true success story. Mm-hmm. We have to look at success all the time. And I think, to me, that success really means a lot, because as a parent, we always want the best for our kids. And I can tell you it's very hard to see your kids suffer.
Yeah.
And when that accident happened, I start questioning, what have I done wrong in life? Would we have had this issue if we had not lived on a farm? And I think everything in life happens for a reason.
Yeah.
But it's one of those deals that, it was that much more bittersweet, made me that much more proud, because the fact I know the limitations. It's quite a feat, first of all, to run that 5K in every county. But to know where he came from, that means that much more to me, and makes me that much more excited about it, and that much more proud of him.
That's so cool. Very
That's
cool.
incredible. I just want you to know, I've probably told this story before, but when they changed, this is a Misty story, I have no doubt that Misty could have the perseverance to do this, because I was introduced to Misty Bivens as an FFA student because we used to have impromptu speeches in an impromptu room, and it was not prepared public. And I have made fun of my younger brother, who everyone on the podcast knows. Him and your oldest are close to the same age. I think they've gone to some things together and different things with FFA. But I told him all the time, I said, you have not lived at FFA convention if you do not have Misty Bivens in the impromptu room telling you to keep your mouth shut. They were not to see any phones. And she better not see any handwritten notes in that binder until you get those cards out. And I tell you what, and so I spent the first couple years like, that is the scariest lady I've ever met. And then got to know her and have just this incredible appreciation for her, and everything she does in the county. Talk through that balance, because I think we have a lot of farmers that have a spouse that is a teacher, but it's so weird to even call Misty just a teacher. I mean, she does so much in the community, and having an ag department like you guys have, and that she's been able to build with her co-teachers. Talk through what that's been like, kind of raising your boys with those two facets, having that kind of education perspective and the farm perspective as well.
Well, I think, first of all, both of us are products of FFA. I like to point out Misty was a state officer the year before I was. She is actually about 6 months older. She always loves it when I bring that point up and tell the people that. But, I think we were products of that. We were taught, those values early on. And looking back now, we understand how valuable that was in our life, what it led to in our life. This is probably the first year, I will say this is her best year ever, because the fact she now has both of our boys in class. One's a freshman, one's a senior. And she's getting close to retirement age, but everything in life we do, whether it's being an ag teacher, being a farmer, it's what we put into it. Misty sees value in kids, and she has, and last night I was at an event, and my former ag teacher was there. He's now retired, and he's had a very successful career, and he was very influential in my life. It's not just how he molded me and directed me. I remember, I tell people, I lost my father at an early age. He died in 2012. And I remember my ag teacher, Bland, he showed up. He was the first one at the funeral home. And it's little things like that that mean a lot to you. And I've seen the impact my wife has had on those kids. And I think we oftentimes forget kids are very impressionable. We can be that influence. We can be that positive influence on her. And I laugh about it. Obviously as a farmer, I put in crazy hours sometimes. There was a week, I hate to keep going back to the legislature, but everybody talks about, oh my gosh, I remember one night we stayed till 6 or 7 o'clock, and I was driving back and forth every day. I still do that, because that's my time to catch up on phone calls, whatnot. Now, granted, I've learned that people don't like when you call at 5 a.m. in the morning sometimes, but when you're on your way to Frankfurt. But, I remember one day, there was a lady there, and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so wore out. I hope we don't have to stay that late again." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I drove an hour and a half home last night when we got done. Then I went to the office and worked for another hour. Then went to the house and had supper and got up and was on the road by 5 a.m. the next morning." You know, it's all in what we get used to. But I tell people, Misty works as crazy of hours as I do. It's just like right now while we're filming this, she had an opportunity. Cyrus is on the 4-H state dairy judging team. So her and Cyrus, I talked to them on the way in this morning. They're on their way to Madison, Wisconsin World Dairy Expo. And people say, well, you know, it's very easy for her to do that with her kids. But what I don't think a lot of people understand is she is probably harder on our boys than she is on any other kid. And it's funny, you meet different people throughout things, and you're like, they associate the name like, oh my God, you're Miss Bivens' husband. You know, and they tell a story similar to what you told about that prep room. You know, she, and I always laugh, and I'm like, yeah, it makes you give you no appreciation of how tough I really am. If I can deal with her, I can put up with her, you know, and it's, but it's all about
we'll
what
make
we
sure
put
we
in.
send this to Misty.
That's fine. She knows. You know, after 24 years, she's kind of accepted this, but it's what you put into it. Yep. And she sees the value now, and I think we both do. And that's something that comes with age, is you realize we've got to invest in our youth. We've got to make sure that they are, because obviously they're going to be the ones that not only are taking care of us one of these days, they're going to be the ones carrying a torch, the future ones that maybe be sitting here behind a microphone, hosting a podcast or being interviewed on a podcast, our future government leaders, our future farmers, whatever it is. And they know that, you know, and she appreciates that. And I think the kids, maybe they don't appreciate it at the time, but they realize later on, hey, we appreciate what she did for us.
Yep. It's funny you say that. My parents, very, very active leaders, and I appreciate that. And we were transplants into Kentucky as a whole. So they were getting involved in meeting people at the same time. But my mom coached me in soccer for years and years and, like, got trained to do things. I mean, like, they didn't have a huge soccer program. And my dad coached me in livestock judging. It's so funny. I think when you are successful as their child, people assume you got a leg up or they were easier on you. And it is such the opposite. It's funny, I'm in my 30s and I'm still learning things about, I don't know, people that had said we did a good job or had asked for us to go, you know, recruited me to go judge somewhere, and how that wasn't told to me for a week or two because they're like, I didn't want you to get a big head, or I wanted you to, you know, really keep working and grinding. I didn't want you to kind of take it easy. And I'm like, man, isn't that hilarious? Because if that would have been anybody else on the team, it might have been used as a motivator. And not that that was the wrong move, but it's just so comical to me when people do think that. And I knowing Misty's personality, I'm about 100% sure you're right. She's probably just tougher on her kids than anybody else. But I think it molds you into just an even better version of yourself. And it shows you the importance. I tell people all the time, having parents that were willing makes me, I don't think there's any different. Like, I didn't know there was a choice. My mother taught my religious education class. My dad was a 4-H leader and did livestock judging. To me, that's a prereq. That's just what you do. And I think as you do that for your kids, that creates the next generation of leaders and volunteer advocates for those kids. So I appreciate what y'all do, and I think it's really neat. I do want to ask, though, because we talked about this before we started recording. Talk to about the schedule. You are, I believe now, the only full-time farmer in state legislature. And a lot of people ask, well, we're a part-time legislature, so, I mean, they just go back and forth a few times, right? And they're not in session, so what's the big deal this summer? Talk through, maybe people get it, maybe, during session, but talk through this interim. What does the summer look like? I mean, that's kind of your busiest season for crops, and you're getting yanked to committee meetings. I mean, how does that go?
Yeah. Well, you know, and I think I was on the phone today coming with a guy that was interested in possibly running for an open seat that's going to be open next year, and he was asking me questions. I told him, I said, it's what you put into it. It's what you make of it. It's just like everything in life. You know, whether it's marriage, having kids, it's what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And I will say I'm probably I'm not the Webster's dictionary picture of a politician. You know, for one, as you all well know, I speak my mind a lot of times, but I think that's part of what's missing sometimes. And I've told people we don't need all farmers in Frankfort or Washington legislating because we're going to miss out on things. You need a very diverse group. I think I bring a different aspect. Right. You know, let's talk about, you know, the fact that we farm across several counties. You know, I deal with roads. I deal with roads from a different aspect than what somebody that's going to a 9-to-5 job. I deal with utilities because of all the land we're covering, utilities crossing our farms. I have a different aspect than things. But, during the interim, and I was really concerned about the time frame, and I talked to a lot of people before I made the decision to drop my name in the hat and run. And they told me, they said, Ryan, you can handle it. And I've this year, so me and Kim Holloway, who's from far western Kentucky, we share the same LA. And, Kim's 4 hours from Frankfort. I'm 85 miles. So I could go in every day. And there's people that are in Frankfort very regularly. That is their commitment. Just because I'm not sitting behind my desk in my office doesn't mean I'm not a legislator. It was really funny the first month. We get out the end of March, come home in April. Finally, at the end of April, my LA, she calls. She's like, Ryan, you realize you got 3 work days a month you could come in? Yeah. She goes, well, you haven't been in for any of them. Do you realize what I've got going on? I'm not coming to sit behind a desk to check email and talk on the phone. I can do that from the tractor. I can do it in my farm office, whatever. It's about being accessible and being available. It's not that I'm not doing my job. I'm just not doing my job sitting in Frankfort. And there's days you go to Frankfort for committee meetings. We had our committee meetings. I had 2 committee meetings that took place at the state fair. Last night I went to an event to support another candidate just to show my support because he's a close friend. It's all about balancing. It's no different. And when I took on this job, and I think a lot of people didn't realize, they was like, oh my God, how are you going to do this and still farm? They didn't realize, those of us in agriculture, how many boards and stuff we sat on.
Right.
I was gone all the time. I was sitting on numerous boards. In fact, it had got to the point the year before I told Misty, I said, I've got to learn to say no. That's my biggest problem. I can't say no. And I said, I've got to figure out something to say no. And I think, once again, let's go back to our faith. I think God sends you down a path sometimes that you don't quite see. But when he opened this door and said, hey, I got the phone call from my current state rep at that time saying, I think you need to throw your name in the hat and run for this. I thought, you know what? I don't want to use this as my scapegoat, but I also think this may be my change of direction.
Yeah. This
is how I say no to things, because there's a lot of things that are conflict of interest. I can't sit on a checkoff board anymore because I'm involved with politics.
Right.
So that was a way. I feel like it was time for me to move on. I laugh. I told people, I said, when I get in politics, I really think I'll have more time at home.
What a wild thought. But it's probably true.
It is true. And yes, there's a lot of nights I'm gone. There's a lot of times I go to different meetings, and you can't make them all. We all have to have that balance. Obviously it comes God, family, and then after that we prioritize. And there's things I miss out on sometimes with my family because I'm tied up in an event, but you have to do that balance. But just because you're not sitting in Frankfort doesn't mean you're not doing your job. There is not a day that goes on I don't get a call about whether it be a road issue or, the number of issues of calls I get. A lot of people, they want to talk to somebody. And I tell people, I'm no different. If I've got a problem, I want to talk to somebody. Whether they can help me or not, at least I can vent and I can air. And that's the way a lot of people are. I tell the story. I got a call from a constituent. It's been a couple of months ago. He called the hotline. He says, my LA call, she's like, this guy's adamant he talks to you. I said, okay, what's he want? She goes, I don't know. He wouldn't tell. So I called this guy, and we had a very civil conversation. But just the conversation is, first words out of his mouth says, young man, you don't have a clue what it's like to pay property taxes. Oh. I sat there and I was like, okay, so I'm just going to listen because there's no way I can answer this without making him feel uncomfortable. So we had a very civil, long conversation. Great guy, and he had a problem, which I have nothing to do with property taxes as a state rep.
Right.
That's the first issue at hand. But the second issue, we get to the end, he says, could I be so bold to ask the question right there at the end of the conversation? He goes, just what did you do before you got into politics? I said, well, actually, sir, I was a full-time farmer. I still am. What do you farm? Tell him. How many acres you farm? Tell him. There's this long pause. I'm very sorry. I guess you probably do know something about property taxes. Yeah, I know a little bit. So anyway, it's all in perspective. It's I've always taught you don't assume things, but it certainly has been. We talked about early on about being in groups of like-minded people. This has been something I've stepped out of my comfort zone, because not necessarily everybody there is going to have similar interests that you have.
Right.
And you've got to be open-minded, but I also feel like I'm trying to do some good. And I think a lot of people have learned, hey, Ryan is involved in this industry. If we got a question about agriculture, who do we go talk to? We go straight to him. Yeah. And I think that's very worthwhile, and it means a lot that I'm able to take that role and stand up for our industry, because it's we're getting to be a smaller group every year. And I'm glad I'm able to do that.
I think that's important, what you just said there, that our farmers, they don't have to run for legislature, but being involved in your community and being the farmer on the school board or being the person and, like that people call to ask for. I do a lot of media training. I go, be the person that reporter in that local community calls every time they need an agriculture representative to be interviewed. The audience has no idea that they interview you every time when they talk about agriculture. And you could be that person, and we'd rather you do it than someone else, like you talked about earlier. We'd rather people that are involved fully in the industry. So I think that's a big piece of what you're saying is like, you don't have to go all the way to the legislator, but being involved in some way and being that voice and being the source for folks, because there are only so many farmers now.
Well, and I joke oftentimes, of course, as a state rep, we have about 45,000 constituents per rep. But I tell people I have the biggest constituency across the state because I've got my 45,000 and then I've got all of agriculture.
Yep.
Because of my involvement over the years, whether it be through Farm Bureau, Soybean Board, whatever it was, I've developed those friendships, and people will call me. They won't call their state rep. They'll call me, and they live hundreds of miles away. Hey, Ryan, we've got this problem. How can you help with? And I've stressed to folks, and I think this just comes natural, that a lot of times we hold people in elected positions. We think they're untouchable or unattainable. We cannot have that connection to them. I mean, I'm not one. Everybody. It's like I had some people advising me early on. There's like, okay, so you need to be careful about where you put your address at, because you don't want people that are adversaries showing up to your place. How am I going to disguise where my place is at? We have hosted farm tours, non-ag groups, everything else out to the farm.
Right.
People know where I'm at. It's not like I just pick up and move.
Yeah.
They know where our place is at. My cell phone number is out there. They was like, oh, my God, when I first started a Facebook page, I put my cell phone number on there, fill out all the information just like we do, registering it. And, it's on my Facebook page. And everybody's like, you need to take that down. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's too late. And I'm not going to get another number because I'm not going to deal with that handed out. Now, what I have learned is you don't always answer the phone. If you don't have that number in your phone, let it go to voicemail. They send you a text, then you call them back.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people have got to learn. And I've told farm groups that I've spoke to, if you do not have a personal relationship with your state senator, your state representative, shame on you. You ought to have their contact information in your phone, and you ought to have that kind of relationship that if you have a problem, you pick up the phone and you call them or you send them a text. Even our Washington delegation, I think we're very blessed in Kentucky. We are so blessed. We turn on national news and we hear about all the bad things in politics, but we are blessed in Kentucky. We've got some great individuals representing us. I brag all the time on Brett Guthrie, Jamie Comer. Those are two right there that are in very powerful positions now that they are as down to earth as we are. And we forget this concept that everybody, I don't care if it's Donald Trump, if it's Ryan Bivens, if it's Matt or Renee, we all get up and we put our pants on the same way every morning, one leg at a time.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so funny you say that. I cannot tell you how many people, after you got elected, they were like, oh, thank God I've got Ryan. I can just call Ryan now. And I'm like, you are from East Kentucky, or you are from the freaking end of West Kentucky. And I would say, yes, and I'm so glad that Ryan and you have that relationship and you feel heard and understood, but you need to find a way to feel heard by yours in your area as well. Now, being understood is going to be some work, and I understand that's tough. But I said, you got to remember, Ryan has a district, and he will fight for ag. But, I mean, if it was one, it was 20 that were like, thank God he's here. I got somebody that gets it. And that's wonderful. But we got to have a 1-2 punch here. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and so, and talk through that for me, the collaborative efforts in Frankfort. I think some people do think, I got to call that guy and he's going to get it done for me. After a session, how important is it to educate more, have a team, work through this as a group effort? Talk through that for people that don't understand.
Well, and I've told folks that, and I don't mind one bit, I'll help anybody, whether they're a constituent of mine or not. Anybody that wants to reach out, certainly, and we're all the same way. We're not going to tell a friend, no, we can't take care of you. You need to call such and such.
Right.
But what I have told them, I said, sometimes it's just like that one legislator that got a text message. It was kind of being mean to me that all of a sudden they got woke up like, oh, my God, Ryan knows people. That builds credibility on my part. So that way when they do have that question, hey, Ryan understands this. And this person back home, they appreciate and they think a lot of Ryan. So it means a lot. it's and I've told folks when I got to Frankfort, it's not about Republicans versus Democrats a lot of times. I think it's more of a rural versus urban issue. A lot of times there's an education on it. And I guess the first week I was there in session, this really, really woke me up. And I had a young man who serves in the legislature, comes from a very, very urban, district that he represents. And he got put on the ag committee. And actually there was two of them. And they come running up to me afterwards like, Ryan, thank God you spoke up in there because we don't have a clue as to what you all were talking about.
Oh, wow.
So we figured out because the fact, hey, you live and breathe this industry every day. You know what they're talking about. We took your lead. And I think if I named out these two individuals and everybody else would be like, there's no way they're going to follow Ryan because they are complete polar opposites. But I think that they are smart enough that they realize, and it's just like I have. I don't know the answer to everything, but obviously I try to find somebody, whether it's a constituent back home, it's another legislator, whatever it is, that is an expert in that field. When it comes to the medical profession, I don't go to the doctor. I hate going. I've been in the hospital a couple times. Most of the time it's because I've got to have stitches or something along those lines. That's what we do in agriculture. Mm-hmm. That's what farmers do, and I don't need to be making decisions on, based on, well, this is what I think. No, because I don't know. I have to educate myself. So I have to find that person that understands that lives and breathes it just like I do agriculture. And you go to them and that's what it's about. It's about relationships in life, and it's regardless of what we do, we have to have those relationships. I tell the boys all the time, and Misty will laugh about this too. Our boys live a lifestyle that they take for granted because they've been afforded opportunities to meet people, to meet individuals. I remember during the National Farmer Senior Show this last year, of course, Jonathan Shell, very tight with Jonathan. Of course, a lot of people don't realize that Misty being from Garrett County, Jonathan being Garrett County, their farms actually bordered. They were neighbors growing up. So Misty's known him her whole life. I've known Jonathan a long time. Jonathan treats my two boys like they're his own. We worked and got Brooke Rollins to come to the Farmer Senior Show that night. Of course, one of the biggest things, and I've been a huge advocate for that with KDA, is the Raising Hope program. Mm-hmm. And they have got out there, and Dale Dobson being a neighbor, I tell people all the time, Dale is a guy that he shows up at the farm all the time. It doesn't do any good if you tell him no. He's not going to hear you say no, so you just let him do whatever he wants. Right. But also, I'm very supportive, and Misty is as well, of that program. So we're glad to open our place up to any kind of safety training or whatever it may be. But they started that challenge coin program. And it was so funny. Of course, they had their program scheduled out, and this is one of those proud parent moments that you can't brag on your child enough. But my boys thought, okay, so they got an opportunity to go in and meet the brand new, newly confirmed Secretary of Agriculture. And I don't think they completely understood how big that was. We're in the room, we're there meeting her and talk to her. And I've already walked away because, there's others that were wanting to meet her. And I was talking to some others. And all of a sudden, I remember Jonathan looking at me. He says, Ryan, turn around. Cyrus had took it upon himself. He had pulled out a challenge coin out of his pocket and was shaking her hand and explaining the program to her as a senior, a junior in high school at the time.
Oh, my gosh.
Cool. Yeah.
Here, it was really funny. So the big thing we had about it, they had it planned out the next morning. Dale Dobson was going to do the same thing because that's his program. He was well, Cyrus stole his thunder. But, as a parent, it made me realize my son's been listening.
Yeah.
He's took in this stuff we have done. And, it goes back to those relationships. And, it was funny, the number of people that started texting me, non-ag folks across the state, because the position I'm in now, that Jonathan might have been at a political event. He was telling that story and sharing that story about Cyrus and what he did and talking about our youth. And, we hear it all the time. And we all are guilty of it. We think, oh, my gosh, what's going to happen to the youth of this country going forward? We forget about those success stories. Mm-hmm. And that was one. And I happen to be lucky and fortunate enough that it's my son.
Yeah.
But other legislators, they were at some different events. And I remember one text me one morning, was like, oh, my gosh, Commissioner was here this morning. He was telling this story at our breakfast, and it was your son. He's like, man, Dad, you need to be proud. I said, I'm very proud,
yeah.
And that's regardless of what awards are hung on the wall or what I accomplish in life. At the end of the day, that's the biggest reward I've had that's my boys.
Yeah, that's cool.
And what they do.
Very cool.
Well, I hate to go to a downer moment, but I don't want to not talk about harvest. And I know it's tough, and I'm not. We can go as heavy or as light on this as you want, but as a full-time farmer, as a grain farmer, I do want to give the opportunity, and I want to remember that we do have listeners that are not ag people per se. We have members that are not in the ag community, and I have been told by a couple of people, I bet with all the farming, I bet you're glad for that rain. Well, as a cattle producer, yes, if I have enough warm days, I might get a little bit of pasture kickback, sure. But as a grain producer, it is a little too late, and that's sometimes tough to explain to people without sounding mopey, but it's a tough situation. So I want to give this to you and give you an opportunity to talk however you want to go with this, but how is harvest? What's the mood, and what do maybe people in the communities need to know as they're around their farmers for the next month or two? I mean, this comes out this coming Tuesday, so this is very real. It's very close to home, and it's very kind of now. So talk through that for us.
I think probably the biggest problem we've got in agriculture, what's led to a lot of the problems we have, is we've not told our story. We've not talked about it. We've not been open about it. I shared with a fellow legislator the other day. He asked me, said, "Hey," said, "how's things going on the farm?" And he kind of made the same comment about the rain. And I gave him a quick 10-minute tutorial real quick of what I was going through. And I've told folks, we started out this year as crop farmers. And I will go as far as say as all of agriculture is in a bad situation right now. We can talk about cattle prices being good, but inflation is what has really hurt agriculture right now. Cattle producers are not making, when you're selling cattle at the prices they are today, you would think they're putting some major bank back. That's not the case. That's not the case. They're surviving. Yes, they're making a living, but that's what they should have been doing for the last decades. Mm-hmm. The problem in the row crop side, first of all, us personally, we went through 9 weeks that we got 1 inch of rain. We're decent way into harvest right now. We are about 50% yield compared to what our APHs are. We've ran a lot of beans. The beans are roughly 50%. They're a little bitty. They look like BBs. A lot of corn died prematurely. I can tell you right now, we've caught this rain here in the last day or so that our combines are setting on a farm, and the farm average right now is showing 95. And this is a farm that's got well over a 200 APH. But we went into this year knowing how bad it was going to be to begin with if we made a good crop. And a lot of times folks drive by, and I'll use, for example, for years now, we've welcomed Leadership LaRue, which is orchestrated through our Chamber of Commerce. We bring them out to the farm, and I never thought about it, but I started talking about numbers with them one year because they take for granted. They drive by and they see all that shiny new paint. They see big buildings. They see grain bins, and they think, my gosh, this guy owns land. He's doing really good. And so I've got 2 addictions in life other than, farming and all this stuff. Diet Mountain Dews happens to be one of them. I drink Diet Mountain Dews all day long, and I always hold that bottle up. And I put it in real reality terms that they can understand. I said, I want you to understand the kind of money we borrow in agriculture. I said, I could buy one of these Diet Mountain Dews every minute for the amount of interest I pay in a year. And you can see wheels start turning. I see Matt's wheels over there turning. He's trying to do quick math in his head.
I don't do math. It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Right. And I compare it back to vehicles. Everybody can relate to a car payment. I say, okay, you got a car payment that's probably $500 to $1,000 a month. Well, I've got a tractor payment that might be $50,000 a year, but the problem is I've got 6 of them.
Right.
We've seen inflation hit from the standpoint of, I remember when I bought my first brand new combine in 2009, I gave $225,000, and that's just a combine. That's not heads that go on the front. Last year, we gave $672,000, almost 3 times as much. And a lot of the components are the same. We haven't changed that much. That's how much inflation has hit. In 2002, the first year I moved to LaRue County, it cost me $190 an acre to put out an acre of corn. This year, I've got, when I start counting equipment payments and stuff, I'm looking at well over $900 an acre. Jeez. At $4 corn, you do the math real quick, that doesn't equate. And I think a lot of times people involved in agriculture, and I consider you two to be involved in agriculture because you work in ag jobs, but I think a lot of times you don't understand, maybe if you don't have your boots on the ground, you're not wearing the boots, you're not getting dirty every day in agriculture. Right. We don't fully comprehend it. And I had a group last week that started asking questions, and I finally took it upon myself. I thought, what, if I'm going to preach this and I think we got to bring awareness to this, I need to just lay it out there. We've been very secluded and very private in agriculture, and we don't want to talk about personal things. But I printed off a copy of my budget. I took the budget and I laid it down in front of some folks that work in the industry. And when you got to the bottom of that budget and it showed in excess of a negative $2 million loss that we just me and my wife are going to experience on our family farm this year, I think it opened their eyes up. Because all of a sudden now they know me. They had a face and they had actual numbers to put with that. And the sad part is it's not just a problem concentrated just on Ryan and Misty Bivens. This is industry wide. And I don't know whether it's because of the fact that I am an individual now in an elected position. There's people that do, they made that comment, Renee, like, well, we've got Ryan there now. We can call on him. They know that I'm outspoken. They know that I'm going to stand up for things. But the number of phone calls in the last 2 weeks that I have fielded from fellow farmers, and some of them have been surprising. They have been individuals that I would have assumed they owned a lot of land. They were very well-to-do, a lot generational farms. And they're questioning, hey, what are we going to do? This situation is bad. I've heard statistics from ag lenders in other states as well as our own that, 25 to 30% of the farmers, maybe even more, that farmed in 2025 will not be farming in 2026. Those are alarming numbers. As a child that was born in 79, I've heard all through life, you never experienced the 80s. That was my dad. He would throw that in my face all the time. I remember the first time I bought a big farm, and he's like, oh, my God, son. He lost more sleep than I did. Son, you haven't went through the 80s. And you're right. I didn't go through the 80s. I can remember the farm sales in the 80s as a young child. Remember the auctions that took place. But I told somebody the other day, I said, the problem we have is back in the 80s, and I don't know what the statistic was, and I should have looked it up, but, if 5% of the general population was involved in production agriculture at that time, we could lose 2%. I hate to see us lose it. But the problem is today, we're at 1.2%, I think is the number today. We can't lose 0.5%.
Right.
I mean, as a farmer myself, I don't want to add ground. I don't want to pick up ground. But I'm afraid we're getting ready to lose a generation of farmers. I hope that I'm not one that's involved in it. But I think back, and I know 10 years ago, if this had happened to me, then I probably couldn't weather the storm that I could weather today. And I may not be able to weather this one. The other disturbing part, and I've made this comment, and I hope if there's ever been a time I've been wrong in my life, I hope it's this one. We know that farmers take pride in everything they do. We know that they take pride in not only the crops they raise, the animals they care for, the land that they love and set foot on. But we know that they take so much pride. A lot of times it's hard to accept. It's indifferent from any other business. If a business fails, a lot of times that business, they move on. Those of us in agriculture, we can't do that. It's hard for us. And some of the calls I've taken in the last couple of weeks, I had one in particular. I had a guy, and I consider him a friend, and he called me and he told me talking about how bad the financial times were. And he assured me, he said, Ryan, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. He says, but I was concerned a month ago that my wife and kids, we're going to lose our house. We're not going to have a place to live. And I thought to myself, how can I plan an accident out to collect life insurance to guarantee my wife and kids keep that house? I've made this comment, and this is what I hope I'm so wrong about, is I'm afraid I'm going to go to funerals of people that I call colleagues and friends in our industry before we plant a crop next year, because I think that's how dire the situation is. Yeah. And it's not because of $10 soybeans and $4 corn. I think a lot of the problem is we've seen that inflation hit. We have seen consolidation in the marketplace. I saw a press release yesterday where they were going to look into the fertilizer and seed industry for collusion. I'm glad they are. We probably should have had this wake up call long ago. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody, inflation has hit anybody that their household income, inflation has hit. They understand when they go to the grocery now, that $100 bill does not go nearly as far as it used to. In fact, if anything, it probably takes $200 now to equal what that $100 did. The problem with agriculture is being price takers. It is all trickled down the line, and it has stopped with us. And we, as farmers, cannot pass that increase. We can't say, oh, golly, guess what? I'm going to haul my load of cattle in today. Stockyards, you need to throw an extra 50 cents a pound on there for fuel surcharge for me hauling the cattle over. It does not work that way in agriculture. And that's what I think as people continue to get further and further away from the farm, because we're generations removed now. It used to be everybody could relate to their parents or their grandparents' farm. It's not that way anymore. And I think it's come a point, and I go back to this. I was always taught when you're pointing your finger at somebody, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. And I think those 3 fingers are pointing back to each one of us in agriculture because we have not educated the public about that. We talk about, I know a big initiative of Farm Bureaus right now is farmland transition. You take in my general area, I've thought about, just truly out of concern of farmers we could potentially lose. Let's say it's even myself. If that's the case and those farms are put on the real estate market, they go under an auction hammer, we're going to see that 12 acres an hour we talk about losing to farmland in this state, we're going to multiply that. We're going to see it be 25 or 30 acres an hour, in my opinion, because farmers are not in a financial position to pay this high-priced dollar for real estate. But there's investors out there that are looking for opportunities to build, whether it be residential, commercial, industrial development, that will pay that. And I think we've got to wake up. And, and I applaud our administration in Washington. I think I've never known a president that talks about agriculture as much as they do. But it's become the point, and I'm hopeful here in the next couple of months we're going to hear some serious announcements come out about help, about trade, but the problem is we make trade deals. Those are long-term solutions. We're in a dire situation. We got to short-term fixes. So, I would stress to especially any farmers out there listening, don't, and I hate this phrase. I always loved it when people would tell me something like, I want to smack the crap out of them. They're like, well, you're not in this alone. Well, no crap. But guess what? The next guy down the road, he doesn't have my bills to pay.
Right.
So I would stress to all farmers, please call me, call somebody. 988. That's a suicide hotline for, and you tell them you're involved in agriculture. There's people there that understand it. And it's hard for us. I'll be the first one. It's hard as a farmer to want to talk about any kind of stuff like that. But it's hard, especially to try to talk to somebody that doesn't have dirt on their hands, that's not living it every day. But, we have to stand up for agriculture. And that's a mission of mine. I want to see agriculture continue to grow. I want to see this golden age of agriculture. And I think the day will come. I think we're going to get to a point. I had a group yesterday on the farm with a company we deal with that sell grain into from Japan, and they were in awe because in Japan, they don't have large farms like we do. Mm-hmm. They were looking at equipment. They don't have large equipment. And they said, you're so blessed. That was their words to me. And I think that we have got to wake up and we got to realize in this country, we are so blessed, but we have got to change our mindset and our ways, or one of these days we're going to wake up and say, what the hell happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I for the listeners, I want to make it very clear, and Ryan, you correct me at any point if you feel differently, but I don't bring any of this up to say we're not working on it. And there are big fixes. I think a lot of people say, well, we got to find the root of the problem. We got to get this thing fixed. And you just listed some of them, whether that's a new farm bill, whether that's a relief payment, whether that is looking into collusion, whether that is looking into trade agreements. There are big fixes that obviously Farm Bureau, your national commodity groups, your state commodity groups are all very, very involved in. I think what my goal is, a lot of people listen to this podcast while they're driving, while they're in the combine, while they're whatever it may be. Just be respectful of what people are going through and be cognizant of that. I think sometimes if they don't want to be complaining, maybe let's just talk about how the grandkids played ball on Saturday, or how, the little girl did at the 4-H, speaking contest. Let them be distracted. Or if maybe don't bring up the rain like it fixed the corn crop that's already been destroyed. I'm just trying to help people find perspective, because a lot of times, just like you said, it just takes talking to someone, having someone to speak to. All of that silence in that comment, it's like people that are salesmen that drive a lot. Sometimes that car ride is the most productive, and sometimes your brain going crazy can be the most detrimental. And so I just try to give people some understanding of, know the situation, understand the parameters around it. Know there's a lot of us working and fighting, but that cannot negate the now, and we got to take care of those around us. And they are your neighbors. They go to your church. You see them at the grocery store. They're, but it's not easy right now, and sometimes they're just going to need a friend. And that's, I think it seems silly to have to say that, but it's very important.
It is, and it's not just about agriculture. We ought to have that philosophy every day with everybody because you never know what someone else is dealing with. You know, agriculture, I don't want to segregate it out. I don't want to make it different. I don't think there's any farmers out there in the world or anybody that works in the agriculture field that wants to be, you know, segregated out and, you know, held on a pedestal or anything like that. You know, we're not special. Now, in my eyes, we are special. Everybody's special in their own ways. But I think it just goes back to we need to be decent human beings. We need to, you know, you know, you meet a farmer on the road. I laugh at Commissioner Shell's radio advertisement all the time. Make sure you wave with all 5 fingers. You know, that's, you know, yeah, it's frustrating at times to get behind a tractor going down the road or something, but just understand that they are a husband or a wife or a mom or a dad or a son or a daughter, and all they're trying to do is provide for their family just like you are going to work. Yeah. So, you know, be mindful of that.
Well, we want to thank you. I mean, you've been an advocate. You're going to continue to be that. I know your wife's going to continue to be that. Sounds like your boys are going to be that. And you know, that's an important part of what we do here at Farm Bureau, but it's also important in every aspect of agriculture. So we really appreciate your voice and hope just keep on doing that, in my opinion.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity to be on today. I appreciate the things that Farm Bureau does for us. You know, I tell people all the time, I laugh about it. Mr. Melton, the president, as I like to refer to him, is he oftentimes, I tell him, I said, we may not agree on everything, but you know what? That's the great thing about life. We can all walk away. Mm-hmm. We can have a disagreement, walk away, and we can still be friends. We can, you know, if we all agreed on everything in life, we would live in a very, very boring world. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but thank you all very much. Thank you for what you do. Thanks for having me on. It's been a great honor to be here today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ryan. And thank you, listeners. Be sure to look at our other episodes and subscribe to Let's Get Rural.